Welcome to Valemount Votes. This is VCTV's series of one-on-one interviews with candidates for this year's municipal election, for mayor, for council, for regional district, Area H representative, and for school district 57, Robson Valley representative. And we're here today with Pete Pearson, who is a candidate for council. Welcome, Pete.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you. Great. Thanks for being here. Before we get started, I think what I'd kind of like to do, and I know you've been in Valemount for a long time, but for those who don't know you, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, I was basically raised in Prince George, hired on with the railroad as a temporary job, and just retired last year after 34 years. And I've been in Valemount now 20 years and love the valley. The people here, I mean, it was a very accepting community, very friendly and stuff. And it was just a natural place to end up. So in 20 years, I've been working with CN up until November last year. Very active with the Legion. I've been the president 7 years now, and many other committees and societies I've been involved in the community. My wife Carrie and I married here 10 years ago, and so yeah, we love the valley, and we tell everybody where we go, it's paradise. So.
Well, that's great. Good. Well, thanks for that. A little snapshot of you. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you the opportunity, just like we have with everyone else, to give an opening remark, about 3 minutes maximum. So you can either look at the camera there, or you can look at me, and just start whenever you like.
Okay. Well, as I said, I've been in Valemount now 20 years. I've been and remain active in many of the nonprofit organizations and societies in my time here, and I feel one of the strengths of our community is the number of people that involve themselves and engage in non-for-profits and volunteers in these groups. Each of these groups strengthens our community in a different way. So currently serving my 7th term as elected as president of the Royal Canadian Legion, I understand and appreciate the commitment and energy required to manage and support a not-for-profit organization in our village. Looking to the future of our community, I see the opportunity for us to remain a vibrant village that attracts people and business to live and prosper in a mountain paradise that may seem remote to some, but is still a safe and inclusive community for our children and grandchildren to grow up in, and still only be a short drive in any direction to bigger centers.
Right.
One of the challenges for the incoming council will be to enable and encourage more housing that is affordable and available to families and those that look to live and work in our community. Multifamily residences and smaller footprint style dwellings are needed and would be ideally situated kind of in the core area to, you know, minimize the need for car travel and stuff. Finding ways to encourage this development and supporting affordable housing initiatives is going to be a key goal moving forward for council. And then following in housing's footsteps will be value-added light industry and business. Council needs to make it known that we're welcoming and eager to support any employer that will create living wage jobs for our residents, who then support our local businesses and community with those paychecks. To support those businesses and professionals who wish to work from home, perhaps, we need reliable, affordable power and high-speed internet capability. Alternative energy sources need to be explored and supported if feasible to supplement what we have already. Another challenge that has been put directly on the new council's agenda is the legalization of cannabis in Canada, effective 3 days before our civic election. Council's mandate is to maintain a safe environment for all citizens, and so we'll have to look at restrictions on public consumption of cannabis and the retail sale of the product. I believe it needs to be dealt with much like alcohol versus cigarettes, in that there can be no consumption in public spaces. In closing, I seek your support to give the next 4 years of my time and energy to keep in Valemount the mountain paradise that we love. And I say to the eligible voters, go to the polls, vote for the candidates of your choice. It's your responsibility, don't neglect it. And the election process does not end on election day. voters, young and old, need to stay involved in the process by continuing to pay attention to the conversation and holding council accountable for the decisions they make.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. You covered a lot of the things we're going to ask you some questions about, so that's great. Let's get right into the questions. So most of these have been submitted by the viewers. First topic is actually housing, and that is the big hot button topic right now. We're in the middle of a housing shortage. Some might call it a housing crisis here in Valemount. It's affecting home builders, home buyers, home renters, seniors, anyone looking for affordable housing, basically. It's a serious situation that it makes it difficult for not only the local people, but for those people who may be coming here to work. So we've heard stories about people coming in that were great candidates for a position. They love the town, they love the vibe, they want to be here, and they can't find a place to live.
Exactly,
or they can't find a suitable place to live for their families. So it makes it pretty difficult. The current council has taken some action on this. They struck the Affordable Housing Committee in the fall of 2016, and their mandate is to deal with data collection around housing, strategic planning, funding, zoning, bylaws, that type of thing. They also, probably about 6 months ago, agreed in principle to provide some land for an affordable housing project to be determined in the future. So they've been working on this. So we have two questions on housing for you. It's kind of two parts. First of all, what do you believe the role of municipal government should be in addressing the housing issues we have been and will continue to face? And after you answer that, we'll talk about your ideas about housing. So what's the role of municipal government should be?
I think the role of a municipal government is partly a control factor in controlling development, but it also, I think we have to encourage developers to come into town, take some of the stumbling blocks out of their way as far as restrictions and that, to allow them to build, you know, ideally multi-family dwellings. Mm-hmm. I believe that we have area in the village that we could have a smaller lot sizes for single-family dwellings. You know, 1,000 square feet or less, affordable housing that a single family or a young professional could move into the valley to fill a job and have a place to live. Because as you mentioned, we've heard lots of potential candidates that have come to town and looked, and you know, maybe if they were a single person, they might have found something, but you know, families and stuff like that, there's nothing acceptable. So I think our role is to be open to new development, and take the hurdles out of the way and speed things up for them to get started. Okay, great. The second question is more of a broad question. So what do you think council should be working on over the next 4 years to deal with the housing issues here in Valemount? And do you have any specific ideas that you could bring forward for that, other than getting out of the way? Yeah, well, I mean, I think the getting out of the way part is part of it, but in looking at some of the areas that the village owns property-wise in the community, and as for zoning, to look at multifamily, put it out there on the market with restrictions for a developer to come in, build a multifamily dwelling that can be kept at a moderate rental level, perhaps for employees in the community. We tend to lean towards larger lot sizes. Anybody that comes from the city, they're amazed by our standard lot size. Right. You know, we could take some of the restrictions off, and people that excuse me, have a really deep lot subdivide into two lots for a smaller, not tiny home per se, but like laneway housing, like they have laneway housing, and even just small single family. I mean, you can easily get an 700-800 square foot home on the back half of one of our larger properties. So opening up some of the available property out there with restrictions and controls on how it's developed. We want to avoid speculation, so I mean there has to be some controls on how it's handled and timelines. Seeing property sit empty for multiple years doesn't do us any favors in the community. So
It's hard for locals to look at the amount of houses. I seem to recall in the last survey there was 1 out of every 5 or almost 1 out of every 4 homes is sitting empty in Valemount right now, owned by out-of-town property owners and using it as vacation homes or rental homes or what, not short-term rental homes.
Yeah.
And it's hard when you can't find a place to live and you see all these empty homes that are sitting there.
And I agree. I mean, it's a tough subject. I mean, because these people have come in and they've bought property, they support us with their taxes, utilities. Not so much the local economy in that they're only here so many weekends a year because it is a recreational property. And so I understand, the frustration of somebody that wants to come and live in the community, has the opportunity for work, but that house sits empty.
Right. And
I don't know what the solution to that is, putting controls on recreational property. But yeah, it's definitely a situation that's frustrating.
It's challenging for sure. Let's move on to our second topic, which is economic development and/or economic diversity. You touched on it a little bit in your opening statement. So we've just been talking about how we've been growing, we've been building homes, we've been having new businesses opening in the community. Tourism's been on the rise in the last few years. However, there still seems that there can be a lot more done in terms of fostering growth in maybe the business side, light industrial side, value-added businesses, as you talked about. So we have 2 questions. One's on economic development and one's on economic diversification. The first one is, and it's a kind of a bread and butter question that most politicians will be, or potential politicians will be asked in an election, is what are your ideas for stimulating economic development here in Valemount?
Well, I think promoting our location. We are so central to so many things on a major highway. I think, letting people know, freeing up areas that can be developed for light industry and value-added industries and stuff like that. Taking away some of the red tape. Government is famous for red tape that has hindered projects in the past, and I think if we can look forward to encourage people to create a business or a development plan that'll create jobs, living wage jobs in the valley, I think, I'm not sure outside of strict promotion of the valley what we can do, but that would be my start. Right.
So by value-added businesses and light industry, what kind of things are you talking about? Are you talking about something like the brewery, which is a a manufacturing facility, but it's it's not like puffing out emissions of toxic gases and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of opportunities. We have a cedar post and rail mill that is doing really well and hiring, so that's employing 24 people out there right now. We have a lot of land that was left over from the old mill site that we could encourage, and talk of the community forest, talking of building their own sawmill. That's huge news for the valley. Right. Keep our wood here. Right now, every log that is cut in the valley is going outside the valley. So, to have another local sawmill potentially open is huge. With the access to rail transport, highway transport, I think any industry could be encouraged to be here with the right tax breaks and stuff like that to encourage them to set up shop here. And as one of the things I mentioned, having reliable power at a reasonable price and high-speed internet. Mm-hmm. Every industry relies on power and internet to survive.
Right.
So if we can, have that as a reliable product, I think that'll help towards bringing people.
So in general, would you favor the old school kind of thinking of going out and looking for that one big, company to come in and develop a property here that will employ half the town, or are you more about smaller, as you said, value-added kind of businesses?
I think we're in an environment now where I think we need to look at smaller, more sustainable, value-added type industry versus, you know, that huge mega mill and stuff like that. That just doesn't seem to be a business plan that is going to carry forward, cost-wise, and everything is so market dependent, market driven, you know. And with the American model below us, you know, I think sustainable smaller industries that can share product, you know, a waste from one industry may be useful to another industry. Right. You know, burning biofuels, you know, to create energy to supply power for yourself and a neighbor industry, maybe, that
right.
kind of thing.
Yeah,
so.
Well, you've been here long enough to know when the mill was operating, and we were reliant on that mill for much of the high-paying work that was in the valley.
Yep.
And it's a boom or bust thing. That mill closed, and half the town basically left.
Yep.
And now we've kind of been moving to more of a tourism base, which is a little more sustainable. However, still can be determined by exchange rates, by, you remember the big tourism drop-off after 9/11, right? People weren't traveling there. So we don't want to go from, you know, the mill-based economy to a tourism-based economy being one thing. And that kind of leads us into our next question, and that is economic diversity. So what is your definition of economic diversity, and how do you see that working here in Valemount?
Okay, well, economic diversity, I mean, you know, by definition would be several business models, industry, working within the community. As you mentioned, tourism, it's huge. That's what's supporting our village right now. But it's not all in all sustainable. I mean, it doesn't provide a living wage for the most part. The number of people required to support tourism don't have a place to live. So, I mean, we all see businesses in town that run short of staff because they have nowhere to live. Right. So I think to have a diverse economic community, you know, we need to attract smaller businesses. If we have a dedicated high-speed internet, you know, there's so much high-tech industry where, I mean, you may sit on your computer and work all day, but who wouldn't want to look out your window and see mountains when behind your screen, right? So I think it's attracting that kind of business, and I think we will with the advent of the bike park, bringing in young professionals. They're loving it. They see the valley. They love it. You know, if they can live at the bottom of that mountain and still do their work, I think they can be encouraged to do it. And we still need industry, value-added industry in the community. I mean, we are surrounded by forest products, so finding a way to use them in different areas, not strictly full-on lumber production, but I mean, there's other alternatives to use wood product out there. So it's kind of interesting because you talk about individuals coming in, what they call lone wolves, coming in to work out of home, and that's a great thing. And you have to say, well, why would they come to Valemount? Well, they come to Valemount for the lifestyle, I would imagine, right? Because we've got the nature, we've got the scenery, we've got the small community, et cetera, et cetera. It's worked really well for communities that have actually developed that as a theme for their town. And Nelson comes to mind as an arts kind of town and an artist kind of thing. Kimberley as that kind of Swiss sort of village kind of thing, right? So maybe we just need to work on what our thing is in terms of that, and make it even more attractive as a destination for people, because people in the city can't afford a home anymore. You can't buy a house in Vancouver unless you're, got two incomes well over $200,000 a year at least. Exactly, yeah.
And here we've got land, we've got places to develop, we've got natural resources, perhaps a ski hill opening, international ski hill, a great, well-renowned bike park, and yeah, I think we just need to get creative in how we tell people about what we are. Right?
Exactly, and that's the thing. I mean, we have so many things in this valley that can bring, young professionals to our village, and you know, you get out in the community. I'm involved with the Legion and promoting music, and the amount of local music in the valley, it's amazing. You know, like everybody you turn to plays an instrument or sings, and the artistic community, I think, yeah, I mean, if we could develop a space, possibly utilize some of the empty retail space on Fifth Avenue, create that downtown core and a cultural area. You know, with the improvements on Fifth Avenue, I mean, it's a very inviting place to be with the benches and the trees and stuff like that. Encourage people to, you know, come downtown, but we also have to let them know there's more to downtown. Right. You know, and that's why we have that turnaround on Fifth Avenue, because people think that's the end of town, and they don't get across the tracks and see what's over there. So promotion of all our small businesses and stuff like that. The Swiss Bakery is a prime example. People come from Europe to go to the Swiss Bakery. Right. Yeah. You know, it's like, well, what brought you to Valemount? Oh, we heard about the Swiss Bakery. It's like, wow, okay. That's great. Yeah. You know, so I mean, those are success stories, and you know, I think that really says a lot about what we have in town. Yeah. I mean, this is the information age. You go in and you say, what are things to do in Valemount? And it'll bring up on your Yelp listing the top 5 things to do. And maybe number 1 is the Swiss Bakery, and 2 is the brewery, and 3 is the bike park, and whatever, right? Yeah. So you don't have to do as much research as you used to find the great things. You know, and a prime example is that's how, you know, my wife and I just finished a vacation down on Vancouver Island, and boom, Google. 12 things to do in Nanaimo, 12 things to do in Ucluelet, and it's like, boom, it rattles it off. And you're going to go with the experiences of others because they've already tested it out for you, right? Yep, so, exactly, yeah. Well, let's move on to our third topic here, which is air quality. According to BC Lung Association's 2017 State of the Air report, Valemount had the worst measured air quality in all of BC in 2016, which is the last year the data is available, with nearly double the provincial average objective for PM 2.5 emissions, and exceeding the provincial baseline of 25 micrograms per cubic meter on 72 out of 365 days. So that's 1/5 of the year. There were in 2016 there were no wildfire-related smoke advisories issued. Not like this year and last year where we had tremendous amounts of fire. The question is, do you have a plan or ideas for addressing this important health concern of poor air quality for Valemount? And if so, can you tell us what they are and what specific actions you might recommend to help? I think the air quality thing, it's a tough subject when you live in a rural community that has access to free firewood. You know, anybody that has baseboard heaters know what it costs to run on hydro. So you supplement, or their main source of heat is wood. And we just happen to live in a valley that is prone to inversions. So I really believe education on proper burning, you know, get people so they know, you know, treat your wood. You know, just, you don't go and cut a green pine and throw it in the burner. Don't burn your garbage. We all have a neighbor that does that. And gee, I wish we were past that. You know, and I walk in the mornings, and I mean, there are definitely days where it's a factor. So, and I know there is a program, I think it's still current, for subsidies for upgrading wood stoves to more efficient, but a truly efficient wood stove is in the neighborhood of $4,000. So those families that are reliant on wood are generally low-income families. Right. The government can only help so far towards it. So I don't know if that's entirely the solution, but I think education towards proper wood burning. I think, I don't know how it would work in our village with our truck traffic on the highway, and you know, but pursuing enforcement of the anti-idling bylaws. Right. It's a provincial bylaw. We're supposed to be a non-idling province, but
Whereas you can have trucks in the wintertime from 5 p.m. on, parked there until 6 in the morning, running 20 or 30 trucks in that neighborhood.
Exactly. Yeah. And, you know, and there are times, you know, when the highway's closed, and I mean, our town is plugged. You know, I've seen 15 semis just on my corner when the highway's closed, and they're all sitting there without exhaust pumping. And so that's going to be a tough battle. Enforcement isn't free, so you know that costs money too, and it's not a popular thing. No, of course. So I mean, I think that's a couple things. Looking at alternative energy, I mean, geothermal and that kind of thing, I think will make a difference if we can make it feasible, make it affordable to get into communities. I mean, especially for small business. You get small business running off geothermal, now you're taking some carbon footprint away. I know it was mentioned the possibility of natural gas. I don't know that they're looking at the closest access to natural gas is Kamloops. So the affordability of bringing a pipe from Kamloops to Valemount for 1,000 customers.
Well, I had a discussion with Owen already. We had our interview already, and what he said was they weren't going to do a pipeline, or weren't even proposing it. What it would be a plant here where they would actually bring the gas and store it here. They would truck it in and store it here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they wouldn't have a pipeline from anywhere. Of course, they would have to have, I don't know how they would, I don't know if you can truck natural gas to homes like you can propane. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe you have to run pipes
yeah.
from that plant to the homes in Valemount. That was sort of the idea he was talking about.
Okay. Yeah, because generally it's piped individually into the homes. It's not like it's not like propane where you have a storage tank in your yard.
I've never seen one for natural gas.
No, it's all underground and stuff. So I mean, expensive to get started, but once it's there, it's sustainable and constant. You know, you don't run out of natural gas like you do propane.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So our fourth topic is on leadership, communication, openness, and transparency. Being a counselor requires numerous skills. I'm sure you're aware. Sometimes you need to be a leader. Sometimes you need to be a consensus builder. You have to have the ability to present Valemount's issues to higher levels of government, and sometimes forcefully because they don't want to hear what your concerns are sometimes. You have to have the willingness to listen and respond to the concerns of Valemount residents in an open, fair, and transparent manner. So we have two questions on the whole area of communications and leadership. The first one deals with the position of Chief Administrative Officer. So for those who don't know, the Chief Administrative Officer is the key position, the key employee position. They manage the affairs of the village on behalf of council. They're the only ones who report directly to council, and council is they are council's only employee, but they also manage all the rest of the village staff as well. So it's a very important position. In the last 4 years, we've had 7 CAOs or interim CAOs while they were looking for CAOs. And this has resulted in hiring costs, termination costs. I believe there was a study done about one of the CAOs. Also costs in terms of instability in village operations, because every time you turn over your manager, there's a learning curve, and there's you have to get back into that again. So if elected as a councillor, what would you do to try to avoid the constant turnover in this CAO position that is really hurting us, I think, from moving forward?
Well, I like to think, being elected as councillor, I mean, you're being elected to a team. So basically there's 5 councillors. Right. One just happens to be the mayor. And so I think it really needs to be a group discussion on what's happening to try and make it a workable situation. I mean, if it's a flat out failure to do the job, is one thing, but if it's just a personality, I think it's the role of the council to, maybe take charge of that situation and make it work. And it's not strictly a mayoralty choice. It needs to be made at the council level. Because, like you said, I mean, that CAO is the educated job. Those of us get elected council have no direct experience per se.
Right, they're the professionals in that, right? Yeah.
So, I mean, as council, my feelings are we are there to take their guidance. They know the ins and outs, they present it to council, and it's discussed, and then it moves forward. So I think it would be our duty as council to try and maintain the continuity and make it work with the particular CAO to keep them in place, failing a complete failure to do the job.
Right, right. Okay, the second topic is a question on this topic is communication. So during this current council's term, no formal communications policy has been developed. The town hall meetings that we used to have, or the whatever they call them, community conversations, have been stopped. One of the media outlets in Valemount, and it's not VCTV, has had difficulty getting information from the current mayor. And council really hasn't done anything to make it easier for people to engage with them and to have a direct line of communication. For example, and this is one of my pet peeves, and I'm at council all the time, so I see it all the time, is people who want to be a delegate to council to speak on something that they know is important and should be coming up on the agenda. They have to get their delegation request in on Thursday at noon. However, the agenda doesn't come out till Friday afternoon. So you don't know if the item you really wanted to talk about is going to be on the agenda or not. Yep. Now, I don't say, somebody said, well, that's a deliberate thing, right? I don't think it's a deliberate thing, but I just think it's one of those things that hasn't been thought through carefully in terms of having that kind of engagement. Another thing that I see all the time, because I'm at every council meeting, is there is a public comment section. It's held at the very end of the council meeting, just before they adjourn. People are given 2 minutes to talk. However, all the decisions have already been made during the council meeting that are going to be made at that meeting. So when you're commenting, you're either commenting in favor of or as opposed to a decision that's already been made, right? Yep. Whereas McBride and some other communities flip it around a bit, and they put their public comments right after they approve the agenda and the minutes, and then they have public comment. So for anything that's on the agenda tonight, if you want to have some feedback at it before we get to discussing it, now is your chance, right? Which gives council the opportunity to hear, you know, maybe there's a piece of information that this person has that you wouldn't have known, and you may have voted on it, and then after the meeting went, well, if I had known that, I maybe wouldn't have voted that way, or it may have changed my opinion in some way or another. So just communication things like that. They're not all big serious things, but there's enough of them that it's creating a feeling that public's participation isn't wanted or needed, and I think that that's not a good way to go. So I'll get to my question now after all that long preamble. If elected, what would you do as a councillor to improve communication between mayor and council and Valemount residents and the media to provide a more open, fair and transparent process that will engage people rather than deter them from participating?
That's a great question, Michael. Actually, this is something I've been talking to people a lot about lately, because personally I've found in trying to follow our council's policies, there's very little on the website of what's coming up at a meeting. Right. If you go to a council meeting, everything's already there, and it's item number, pass or fail. Item number, pass or fail. There's no background, there's no reading material for the public to get to that I can find. I've been poking around for a year trying to find so that we understand what that decision refers to. Right, right. You know, we see the things in the papers, you know, saying that this and this and this are coming up for variance or whatever. But the actual business that is being brought to council from the CAO, those decisions are made without the public really being able to see any background on them. I would appreciate that somehow that information is available on the website for those who want to look at it and attend council meetings, that they have background on that vote. And then, like you said, have an opportunity to speak to it before council votes on it. Right, right. Because if you have the information and you have feelings on that topic, you should be able to voice that before it's written in stone on paper.
Right.
So I agree with that. The transparency part as well, I speak to that a little bit in my closing, is I believe in the town hall meetings. You know, being able to hold their feet to the fire kind of thing in public. It's a very, very closed process right now. And so I understand how the media feels. It's not secret. You know, there are certain sensitive topics that have to be dealt with in a different way.
Yeah.
But the general business of our community should be transparent.
Yeah.
And by having transparency, I feel like I'm reading my closing notes already, fosters trust with the voters for the community. Right now, nobody knows what's going on. For those that step up and care enough to look, that's just not there. So I think that's something that I would look to do is definitely promote the idea of council meetings or public forum meetings once a year in a 4-year term for sure. 4 years is a lot of time to cover without really having to report back to the public on what you've done.
Sure.
You know, you can make a lot of mistakes and you can do a lot of good in 4 years, and unless it hits the newspaper or...
Right. I've heard from people who don't really like them is that they think they're gripe sessions, and I beg to differ. I think they're information sessions. For example, we have a major thing coming up. You talked about it in your opening comments, and that's cannabis.
Yep.
A huge thing that's affecting the whole community. Well, how does council act when they don't know what the community wants, right?
Yep.
So just as an example, there are times when it can be used as an information gathering tool, not just a, hey, now give me a review for this year of what I've done. That's not what it's supposed to be about. It's an information exchange.
No, exactly,
right?
yeah.
So.
And I think it can work if it's moderated well.
Right.
And I think that's the key is to have a strong moderator to control it so that you can get your point across, you can get your question out there, but then you sit down, you listen to the response, and others in the crowd can respond one way or other to your question, versus having that one person control the floor, you know, for a length of time.
Right.
We're all limited in time, and you know, I'm looking at the next 4 years if elected, and my available time is going to change drastically. So, you know, if we do an open forum type meeting once a year, what do we need for time? A 3-hour evening, you know, if we get a good turnout. I thought we had really good questions for the open forum, and that was a 2-hour event the other night. And I think it's required, you know, have people to be able to ask questions, see how council thinks on their feet, and what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's move on to the next topic area, and that's conflict of interest. So I'm just going to give you a little background here. On May the 26th, 2015, so that's within this council's term, village staff presented a policy number 64 to council, which was an enhanced set of local conflict of interest policies for councils as recommended by the BC Solicitor General. The Local Government Management Association of BC and the Union of BC Municipalities believe enhanced clarifications of conflict of interest guidelines may be necessary in light of a BC Court of Appeals decision on Salt Spring Island, which I believe you just were at.
I was just there.
Called the Schlenker decision, which two town councillors were found to be in conflict of interest. And have introduced a number of considerations for staff and elected officials when determining when elected officials are in conflict or may be in conflict. And these are contrary, some of them are contrary to what's in the community charter. So the community charter has a set of guidelines for conflict of interest. That's what the village is now using. But as a bit of background, so this policy was an enhanced policy developed by staff at the recommendation of the BC Solicitor General. Policy 64 was adopted here by a 3-2 vote, with Mayor Townsend and Councillor Reimer opposing. 6 months later or so, January 12th of 2016, they rescinded that policy. by a 3-to-1 vote, with Councillor Salt opposing, with the recommendation that they go back to the conflict of interest guidelines in the charter. And there wasn't a lot of discussion as to why that was being done. People are still wondering why that was being done. So the question is, do you believe that conflict of interest guidelines that are stronger than those in the charter are necessary? And if so, would you support putting forward again a group of locally written, locally tailored conflict of interest guidelines and definitions?
I think I would support it. This has been a topic in the village for quite some time, and it's always tough to get the qualified people to run for office, and so what do they do when they own a business? Do we step away from our business? It's not like the councillor or mayor's job pays enough to offset a normal income. But I do believe we need stronger conflict of interest regulations. It's something I had to look at in running for council, because I also have a part-time permanent job with the arena under regional district. Regional district cleared me on their end. I had to confer with the village to clarify there that I'm okay. Any regional district topic that came up regarding arena usage and such, I would have to opt to recuse from. And that's totally understandable. Likewise with my position with the Legion. Anything that comes up that deals with Legion business, I would have to recuse myself from. I have no problem with that. But I truly believe that we need to look at it, because we are making policies and bylaws that can affect how a person's business does. And so for someone to be in a position to financially gain directly or indirectly from the business at hand, I think
that's a clear conflict.
Need to recuse and step away. And I mean, and I think that's a decision that needs to be made when you throw your hat in the ring. You know what your business is. You know the benefits and the disadvantages to being on council and still maintaining your business. So I agree with the stronger and firmer writing of the bylaws, and I would have no problem stepping away from any issue that would conflict.
It's interesting. I've read the legal opinions from various law firms who were commenting on this decision, and they were saying it's become much. We're used to being on boards and things of that nature, and you understand being on a board or being an executive member, you have to step away anytime money is involved, right? Anytime, that's a no-brainer. Everybody knows that. But now you can be a member of a society, not a director, not an executive member, just an average member, and still be found to be in conflict if you as a council person vote for something that benefits the society, because by definition a member wants to see the society benefit as well, which has never been the case in the past. But that's why it's different than what's in the charter, and they're saying, you know what, you may want to be stronger than what you have now, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we're just at a point society-wise where, we have to maintain the CYA program, and to have more stringent restrictions in place, I think, is better than having a little bit looser guidelines that have to be judged on a case-by-case business. Because like you said, as a committee member, I see a difference in a committee member or organization member sitting on council and making a decision that's not a financial decision per se, than maybe another councillor who sits at a little higher level in that organization, on the same decision. Right. So, if we had two Legion members, a Legion member and myself as president on council, and the vote was, does the village fly the Remembrance Day flag for Remembrance Day, I don't think that's a conflict of interest. Whether it comes to financial support and tax exemptions and stuff like that, right. I'm completely out of the room.
Yeah, and you know, it's probably best left to lawyers, but the concern is that maybe it does need to be stronger. So,
yeah.
Okay, let's move on to our sixth topic, which is the Rainbow Crosswalk and an inclusionary community. According to Vancouver's Georgia Straight newspaper, as of June the 11th, 2018, there were 42 Rainbow Crosswalks in BC. On July the 26th, as a bit of background of 2016, this council voted against installing a Rainbow Crosswalk here. You might remember that, citing cost and safety concerns. Prince George installed one there, and it's a you've probably seen it, it's at a four-way kind of intersection. So theirs is a little more expensive. It's $6,000, but they used a process called cold fusion to kind of meld it somehow into the cement. I don't know.
Okay,
yeah. It's a longer lasting kind of thing.
Right.
Prince Rupert installed the traditional one, just hand painted on there for $1,850. And you may remember that a number of the people that were proposing the crosswalk offered to raise the money for the paint and paint it themselves and maintain it every year if it needed touch-ups and that kind of thing. On the safety side, the City of Edmonton conducted a study that showed that there had been no safety problems with their 6 Rainbow Crosswalks that they have there. They found the crosswalks did not decrease pedestrian safety in any way. Research here shows at VCTV that Valemount is one of only 3 communities in BC to have voted against a Rainbow Crosswalk, others being Merritt and Campbell River. So the question for you is, given that Rainbow Crosswalks are seen as a recognition that a community is considered LGBTQ2 plus friendly, if elected, would you support the installation of a Rainbow Crosswalk on a public street in Valemount? A public street, not a specific one. Why or why not?
Okay. I would probably support the idea of having a Rainbow Crosswalk installed in town in some position. When it was originally put forward, it was wanted to be done on the new crosswalks on 5th Avenue, the new brick crosswalks. I wasn't in favor of that. As you mentioned, I just came back from Vancouver Island, and we noticed in Ucluelet there's 4 crosswalks through the school zones, because there's 2 schools side by side. Those 4 crosswalks are all Rainbow Crosswalks, which I think, and it's the main thoroughfare. So I think what that does is it gives an awareness, but it also shows inclusiveness to the students that are using them every day.
Right.
So do we, look at putting one, near one of the schools? My thought on the original one was, if we were going to have one, put it where the Bigfoot Trail crosses 5th Avenue at the end towards the Super 8, where the Bigfoot Trail crosses there.
Yeah, yeah.
It's still visible.
Closer to the entrance of town.
Yeah, and and that way we are still being inclusive and recognizing, but I think that would be a more beneficial place than on the main brick sidewalks of 5th Avenue.
Right. So in general, though, you do support it. It's just where would be the question, right?
Yeah. Right. It's one of those topics that you have to be careful with your beliefs on it. I support them 100%. The LGBTQ2 community, putting the sidewalk to acknowledge them, I think it's a bit of a slippery slope in that, does another special interest group decide they want recognition on the street? But, at this point, yeah, I would support one. It's just not at that end of 5th Avenue, but in another location.
Okay, fair enough. Let's move on to another somewhat touchy subject, cannabis. So as you know, cannabis becomes legal in Canada for recreational use on the 17th, which is less than 2 weeks away. It could potentially have major impacts in communities everywhere, including Valemount. Municipalities across Canada are struggling with what to do. They're looking at all their options right now. It's a two-part question for you. So if elected, would you support and encourage entrepreneurs to start up marijuana retail outlets in the community, or support only sales through BC cannabis stores, government cannabis stores, or are you in favor of banning the sale of cannabis outright in Valemount?
I'm not in favor of banning it outright. I mean, it becomes a legal entity. The control of it, I haven't done a lot of reading on what the options are as far as BC government-ran stores versus private entrepreneurship, but I see no problem with the sale of a legal product in the community if it's controlled, licensed properly, and it's in an area that is not accessible to minors.
Right. So much like a liquor store would be, kind of.
Yeah, exactly, like a liquor store. I mean, it can be its own storefront, but it's got the same rules as far as 19 and over. There's no consumption of the product in the store. It's strictly sales to take home to a private residence. In that way, I think we have to look at it as just another business. We all know it's out there,
right? And
it's not going away. So if we can have that business set up, it becomes another box in our tax base as having retail.
We talked about economic diversification. That's
exactly. Yep. And so yeah, I think you have to be careful with the storefront itself, visibility-wise. I would think that you're going to probably want either a smoked window or a one-way mirror type window so that minors aren't looking in to see what's there, right, and stuff like that. So I mean,
if you go into Petro-Canada or one of the gas stations that sell cigarettes, they are no longer able to display them. They're in boxes.
Exactly.
They can sell them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if we're going to have the graphic images on yeah, on the product containers for marijuana or not, but I totally support
as long as it's done properly.
Yeah, and I mean, licensing will be as strict or stricter than it is with the liquor industry. Yeah.
So the other half of that equation that didn't really add to that question, but it's use. Now you can't regulate. People can smoke in their homes; they can do what they want there. However, public areas,
yep,
parks, playgrounds, walking down the street. If it's treated as alcohol, you can't walk down the street with an open can of liquor, but can you light up a joint and walk down the street, right?
Yeah.
So those kind of things actually will come into council's purview, I think, in terms
yep,
of, well, I don't know if smoking is actually allowed in Centennial Park, for example. I don't know if it is or not, so maybe there'll have to be something, no cigarette or vaping or marijuana, or
yeah,
a whole list of products,
yeah,
there, right?
Well, I believe marijuana will have to be treated like alcohol. I mean, the laws between alcohol and cigarettes are totally different. Being able to smoke 10 feet from a door of a business.
Right.
Well, you can't drink a beer 10 feet from the door of a business. So my feelings and beliefs are that marijuana will have to be regulated like alcohol products. So there's no consumption in public, parks, right, streets, anything like that. People, because you're allowed in your own private residence, becomes a gray area. Because if you're smoking in your backyard and your neighbor doesn't partake, how do you deal with that situation? But within your own boundaries of your property.
Mm-hmm. I lived in an apartment building where smoking was not allowed in the apartment building, so people would go out on their balconies.
Yeah.
And in the summertime, I would have my windows open, and I would have whatever they were smoking, I was smoking, right, as well. So, yeah, I understand that. It's a difficult kind of situation.
And it's a much more pungent smoke than, like, cigarette smoke bothers me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, marijuana smoke, I mean, it's just so pungent, it's a whole different ball game. But
So as you believe, and I think I would agree with you, I don't know what they're doing in terms of provincial guidelines, but it's an intoxicant, whereas
Exactly.
a cigarette really, I mean, you can make an argument that there's nicotine and whatever, but it's like alcohol, it's an intoxicant, right?
Exactly.
And you have to control that in terms of, especially, you know, making sure that it's not on school grounds or places where, you know, youth would be close to
Yep.
it, you know,
And
arena that you work at.
Enforcement is going to become
Right.
a critical issue. You know, because now we have intoxicated drivers driving.
Right.
So the testing involved, and to control that, because impaired is impaired is impaired.
Right. The province is spending a lot of money right now on TV ads to talk
Yeah.
about, you know, driving under the influence of marijuana. Right?
Exactly. So I think that it's going to be a big topic, but for us locally within the village, I think it's. I think we look at bylaws that have been put in place around us. Jasper has instituted their new bylaws. They have different laws than us, but there is no consumption in a public place, on the street, in parks, anything. And I think that's kind of the area we have to look to go.
Don't have to reinvent the wheel, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. There is a little second side question to that, and that is, under the regulations I've seen, people are going to be permitted to grow 4 plants for personal consumption. What do you believe should be the laws on growing cannabis growing in Valemount? Or should there be any?
Wow. I don't see that there's an issue. I mean, because we're talking recreational use as being legalized, 30 grams or less. I have no idea what the yield off 4 plants would be, but you know, I wouldn't have an issue with somebody growing 4 plants. 4 plants, you don't have to set up any complicated growing space, that, to my knowledge, like you're not having to hack.
Hydroponics or something.
Yeah, you're not having to hack into the power system and reversing your meter to drive.
It's not a grow off.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, I have no issues with that. I mean, I don't know whose responsibility would be to control. Like, you know, we're not knocking on doors, coming in saying, "Oh, you've got 5 plants, not 4." But it leads to another topic that just was in the news yesterday, in that with the legalization of marijuana, you're now allowed to carry 30 grams of recreational marijuana on a domestic plane.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
And it's like, well, now what do you do with your drug dogs? Do they determine whether that's 30 or a kilo? Like,
I actually heard that the marijuana dogs were being retired. That they felt there was not going to be a need for them.
actually, and I'd read that too, but
Yeah.
so well, what controls the movement,
Yeah,
you know?
right.
So, but yeah, so now, you know, theoretically, you know, buddy beside you on the plane is going to have could have 30 grams of somewhat fragrant marijuana in his pocket. So,
but you can't smoke on a plane. So
can't smoke it, but you can carry it.
Carry it. Okay, let's move on to last topic, which is maybe not as meaty but important. What are your thoughts regarding traffic congestion and parking issues on Caras Drive? And I think what they meant by this question was the whole Tim Hortons, Petro Highway, 5th Avenue, Caras Drive corner, which is a bit of a nightmare. And also on the Main Street side, around the Swiss Bakery, where people are, you know, backing out of the Swiss Bakery across the other lane of traffic to go this way, or parking half on the road and half on the shoulder,
yeah.
Or whatever. You often probably see it from the Legion point of view. What do you think could be done to improve the situation in those 2 areas there?
Well, and I've been saying it since the 5th Avenue and Highway intersection developed the way it did. It's an accident waiting to happen. I mean, you've got so many different possible routes at that intersection, and if it was locals, we'd be just fine. But I mean, we have tourists. You see them all the time. They're parked on the wrong side of the stop sign because the signage and the lines on the highway don't line up. They really make no sense when you get to that intersection. Mm-hmm. Now we're having trucks back through the intersection at 5th Avenue. They pull off the highway towards Petrocan and then back across the intersection to park closer to Tim Hortons. You know, like,
yeah.
we didn't create drive-throughs for semis, and unfortunately, they feel like they need them. So, I don't know what the controls would be. I think there is enough ditch line between the highway and Caris Drive that maybe we widen that area so, you know, trucks have a little more room to get off the road, because visibility on that corner when they're stacked up, they don't get off the road entirely. The lanes are blocked.
Right.
They totally disregard the no parking zones that we've put in place to free up traffic. So I think enforcement's part of it, but I think we need to look at expanding the width of that parking area for the trucks, because
get them over a little more.
Yeah, because I mean they're coming there to get their rest. You know, every truck driver has to get his hours of rest, get their coffee, get their food. Quite a few of them utilize the one motel for showers and stuff like that. So they have a purpose. It's just trying to make more room for them on both sides of the highway. Could be done. There's a large green space just to the south of 9th Avenue. Do we make a parking truck area, or a truck parking area, where they can pull out, park their trucks, shut them off, and you know, walk a couple hundred yards to a restaurant.
Right.
The traffic flows at 5th Avenue. I'm not sure what the solution are. I mean, a lot of that is a highways-based decision.
Right.
But getting the traffic lights was a huge start, but I think we need to really look at whether we put medians in to control people so they only have one place to turn, controlling access to the Tim Hortons and Petrocan, because, you know, 40-foot trailer pulls off the highway straight into Petrocan and has the whole intersection blocked while they wait for a gas pump.
Some days I feel like I'm taking my life in my hands, especially if I'm coming out of Tim Hortons drive-through and I stop there and there are people going from 5th Avenue onto the highway. There are people coming off the highway onto 5th Avenue, trucks turning at that corner, pedestrians at both sides, people coming out of the Petrocan right 5 feet away from the stop sign. I don't know how that's even allowed, but that's kind of weird. And it all clusters together there, and sometimes all at the same time. Yeah. And so you're sitting there going, I'll pull out halfway, I can't, and you can't see around the Valemount sign to see what's coming the other way from the traffic there. So it's I think, unfortunately, an accident waiting to happen, or somebody could get hurt there. You know, and that's not.
You know, and we've had, you know, not too long ago, one serious accident with a local senior that got caught in that intersection, and it was the same thing where, you know, somebody wasn't aware of the traffic pattern and popped through the light. But I really don't know what the solution is other than
maybe working with Ministry of Transportation, right?
Yep, I think they need to sit there and watch it and.
I'll go out and videotape it one day.
Driver training. I mean, we see so many rental motorhomes that come through town, and you know, these people have never driven anything that size. You know, they get to Vancouver, they rent the motorhome, and they passable on the highway. They can keep going on the highway.
Straight line.
But you put them into traffic, and you see them 5th Avenue, angle parked in front of the stores.
They're basically driving a bus without air brakes, right?
Yeah,
That's the thing.
And it's just a foreign thing to them, and you know, you start getting them to make a tight turn in a traffic area like that, and oh yeah, no, it's.
And then you get the crazies. I was sitting in A&W one time looking out the window. I saw some guy coming on Highway 5 going towards Tijon. The light was red. He took the road onto 5th Avenue and then went out at 70K. I don't think he slowed down at all, and then went out onto the highway the other way. Yeah. Just like shh, like that. Oh my God!
It's a bit of a gray area.
So okay, points for you know.
No, I mean, there's a lot of things traffic-wise I think needs to be addressed in town.
Can you talk about Main Street? We didn't cover Main Street.
Main Street, same thing. I think we just need to widen the area. Unfortunately, now we are stuck with the Bigfoot Trail there, so we can't widen on the track side of Main. I don't know if, again, it's an education and signage.
Right. It's great that the Swiss bakery is that busy.
Yeah.
You know, good for them. But,
Yeah.
but sometimes it is it's a little touch and go over there.
Well, I find it easier to pull off and angle park in the ditch before you get there. There's a wide area there, and I'm not sure whose property that is that comes down to Main Street, but yeah, I stay back from it a little ways and walk. I recommend walking.
Walking, yeah. We live such a beautiful area. Okay, so that's it for the submitted questions. I have one question that's kind of been tailored for you, and that is you recently retired, as you mentioned, after a 34-year career with CN. Congratulations, by the way. That's pretty rare these days that somebody's with one company for that length of time.
And it was a summer job.
There you go. Most people retire to slow down. However, not you. Why have you decided to run at this time, and what do you feel you can offer as a counselor? What's what do you bring to the table, and why did you do it?
Well, retirement sort of snuck up onto me. My work position was kind of in a flux position, and I was just getting frustrated. I mean, after so many years, you're doing the same job, and it just, if you feel you're, one, not having fun getting to work, and that it just becomes routine, that, you know, maybe you're not doing 100% because it's just so routine. So that's why as soon as my date was available, I put my papers in and I jumped onto the railroad. At the same time I did that, I also applied at the arena and took on a permanent part-time job 2 days a week. It's somewhere I'm also very comfortable in, as I play hockey 2 nights a week, so I enjoy that part of things. But I'm currently, I'm not letting my name stand for President of the Legion this year, so that's going to free up some time. And I've always said that once I was finished working full-time, I'd be interested in politics. It's not something you can commit to and work full-time. You know, a lot of people think, well, 2 Tuesdays a month, how bad is it? We all know different. Right. I talk to anybody. And so I now have the time, and I'm young enough, I still have the energy and the love of the village. And so I think I had some concerns with the 4-year term. Carrie and I had long conversations about that being a long commitment of time. She plans on working 5 or 6 more years, so I'm not going anywhere. So I thought it was a good time to throw my name in the hat. And I think with what's happening around the village, I think it's an important time to be a part of the team. You know, with Glacier Destinations on the horizon and just trying to get us going in the right direction. I feel that I have a skill set that I can, you know, contribute to a team. You know, we're a very varied group of candidates for council, so I think when it comes time to putting that team together, it's going to be very interesting. And I think there's a lot of good to be done.
Great, great. Well, thank you. And thank you very much for answering all the questions. Hopefully they weren't too terribly stressful for you.
Not too bad.
So as we did at the beginning, we're going to give you 3 minutes now to make your closing remarks. And you can either, again, look at the camera or look at me and start whenever you like.
Well, I didn't come up with 3 minutes of closing notes, but...
Okay.
So in closing today, I want to... excuse me, I want to thank my nominators for their vote of confidence. It was an interesting process in approaching friends and people in the community as nominators, because you learn really quickly how many of your friends don't actually live in the village. And it's like, oh, okay, oh, yeah. So you move on. So to all those who have expressed their support, and of course my wife Carrie for her confidence and support. I'm honored for the opportunity to be a candidate for council for the village of Valemount. If elected, I hope to be a part of a team that moves our community in a positive direction for the future. Only as a team can a council elected from different backgrounds and beliefs be effective in determining policy to maintain the integrity, safety, and welfare of our community. Transparency is a key to fostering trust between the voting public and their village council. I believe in an open governance that allows the public to know what's happening and to have the opportunity to voice their opinions in a public forum. I believe that voting is the first act of building a community as well as a country. Go to the polls, exercise the right to vote. So many in the excuse me. So many in the world would die for the chance. Put your stamp on the next 4 years of Village Council, and I just ask for your support to be a part of that team. Great.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm just going to reiterate what you said. Go out to the polls and help build your community. This is a right that people have fought and died for us to have, and that's the democratic right to elect our people who will run our communities in terms of mayors and councils, etc. So please get out there and vote. And from a personal point of view, some people say, well, my vote doesn't matter. Well, in a community this size, your vote matters. 1 or 2 votes can be the difference in electing someone or not getting your candidate elected. So make sure you get out there. There's 2 opportunities for you to vote. The first one is advance voting, which is October the 10th, Wednesday, October the 10th, and that'll be from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and it's at the Village Council Chambers, 735 Cranberry Lake Road. The second one is the actual general voting day, and that is Saturday, October the 20th, and that will be from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and that will be in the usual voting place, which is the Valemount Community Hall at 101 Gore Street. So make sure you get out and do one of those 2 and have a say in the future of what happens with Valemount. Pete, thank you very much.
Thanks, Gord.
Something else you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just want to mention if you know any shut-ins or seniors in town that can't get around,
need a ride?
Offer to give them a ride.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to make sure that everybody gets out there and do it. Well, thank you again very much for being here. And thank you all for watching, and we will see you for the next episode.